What was polite 30 years ago but is considered impolite today? I'll blow my cigarette smoke the other way while you eat dinner. My life flashes before my eyes when I don't expect company and someone rings the doorbell. No immediate communication for a few days due to lack of widespread cell phone use and instant messaging. It was normal to just go a couple of weeks without hearing back from a friend or even a few days without talking with a close friend or family member. If someone didn't answer the phone, the assumption was that they simply weren't home and would get back to you within the next couple of days, not that something was wrong. Placing an ashtray on the table during a kid's birthday for the smoking guests. Stopping by a casual acquaintance's home unannounced simply because you were in the neighborhood. One thing that comes to mind is answering machines. Back in the day, it was considered super polite to leave a detailed message, but now, with texting and all, some folks find it a bit much. Like, just shoot me a quick text, you know? Times sure have changed. According to my daughters, a sentence that ends like this. Apparently, to a generation younger than my own, the trailing dots imply annoyance or sarcasm, whereas to me they're just the written equivalent of thinking out loud and leaving a question or thought hanging for possible feedback. The post says 30 years 1993, but my mind instantly went to the 1950s. Giving a kid candy, without asking that kid's parents. Asking about someone's weight loss. I've gone from 250 pounds to 180 in 6 months and no one has said anything to me. I finally asked my friends if they'd noticed and they said of course, but they didn't want to offend me by asking about my weight, lol. Using an ellipsis. Somehow it's gone from being a signifier of an unfinished sentence to a passive-aggressive attack on the recipient of the email or text message. Reading news, sports, etc. while people are visiting. Was thinking about this the other day. I go to my grandparents' house and my grandfather would spend half the time reading the paper. Perfectly acceptable. I look at my phone a few times and it's rude. Phone manners used to be a thing. Literally, an etiquette that society used, with a certain cadence. I'm 40, and remember it being a thing. When I call my 76-year-old buddy, I notice he adheres to it. I do my best to keep up my side of the interaction. Calling instead of texting. Generational obviously, but nearly everyone I know my own age groans as soon as the phone rings, but would happily text or meet in person. In Spain, a guy giving 2 kisses to a girl woman you do not know. In a close personal social situation it's still okay, but in a more formal setting, especially professional, it's rightly considered a bit too intrusive and unpolite. Used to be the norm though. Reminder that 30 years ago means the early 90s. Maybe not polite to do, but it was certainly impolite not to let people smoke indoors. Maybe more like 40 years ago, but a quick peck on the Dawson was king of this. Watching the Game Show Network, and old Match Game episodes, he was always kissing the ladies. He did it later when hosting Family Feud too. Weird. Landing up unannounced at someone's place for a visit. Dressing up like an old nanny woman in order to get closer with your kids after a nasty divorce with your wife. It used to be seen as a heartwarming way to reconnect with your family, but now is seen as rather intrusive to your ex-wife's privacy. In some places saying mum or sir. I live in the South where it's ingrained from birth. Even say it to people my age or younger, if the situation calls for it. More and more people nowadays hate it cause it makes them feel old, or my mom dad is sir mom don't call me that, or something along those lines. How is it an old thing? It's just polite, especially in a professional setting. I don't feel old when people say sir to me, but I know it's a big generational thing, so IDK. Referring to a woman as Mrs. Husband's first and last name. I worked at a DR's office, and all the patients were listed this way. I would lose my mind if someone tried to list my name this way. You could still pretty much assume the role of a parent to random kids you saw out in public acting crazy. Not impolite at all to tell some kid to pick up something they threw on the ground or to ride their bike in the proper place, address adults properly, etc. Nowadays I think it's less common to see small kids out and about on their own at all, and in any case if you did correct a child, their millennial parents would definitely freak out. Winding down the car window to smoke. Obviously smoking in a car in general these days is considered impolite, just in case anyone thought I was implying that it was somehow considered impolite because your passengers would somehow want that toxic smell as well. Calling a waitress honey. Apparently adding a period to the end of a sentence. ITT people confusing normal with polite. Making your kids kiss and hug all the adult relatives who request it. Your children shouldn't have to feel the ick just to keep the adults from feeling awkward. Keeping your butthole away from your sex partner's face. Commenting on people's weight. Calling a lady xiejia little sister in Mandarin. It used to be a polite way to refer to a younger lady or to a waitress. Apparently that's now changed and it generally refers to prostitutes now. This whole post reads like upside down world. A firm handshake. I feel like it used to be used to show you're enthused and happy to be there, meet them. Now it just feels like a power move. If I get an overly firm handshake before, it was that guy is enthusiastic and knows how to do a good handshake, to now where I feel like it's WTF is that guy's problem. Calling without it being scheduled or a text first. Going to someone's house apartment without checking if it's okay first. Calling someone sir or ma'am. I swear I'm not trying to assume your gender, I was just raised this way. Blazing saddles. Seriously, walking through people's unfenced yards on the walk to school. Saying, hey, have you lost weight? You're looking great. I was 3 years old 30 years ago. It was polite to be 3 years old and yell juice at a guest's house, and if they didn't have juice I was allowed to cry because at least I asked for juice. As a 33-year-old man, it is impolite to yell juice and have a temper tantrum when they don't have the juice I like. Calling someone instead of messaging. May get downvoted for this, but getting pissy that you didn't get a thank you note. It used to be okay to comment on things like that, but now it's gauche to expect someone to buy stationery, stamps, and go out of their way. Thank you notes are a waste of paper, and in this day and age, it is not necessary for me to perform outdated social rituals at the sacrifice of my environment. An in-person thank you or phone call is sufficient. A pat on a kid's head from strangers. Dropping by unannounced. In the 90s, some people thought using the word transvestite was the polite word for cross-dresser. Evolved to trans or queen, and now just not discussing one's gender, depending on the situation. Addressing a newlywed as Mrs. Husband's first name, husband's last name. Used to be proper etiquette and now it's just misogynistic. In another 30 years my hunch is women taking their husband's last name will also be a lot less common. Proper punctuation. Now it comes off as rude when someone sends a text with a period LMAO. Asking if anyone needs the phone before you go on the internet. Tipping 15 at restaurants. Now that's on the stingy side. In this thread, people who think 30 years ago was the 1950s or something. I'm having a hard time trying to stop saying, yes sir, yes ma'am. But I'm also thinking, should I try to stop? Asking people when they're going to get married and or have kids. Well, it was never polite, but back then, people weren't as aware of alternatives to cishet marriage and infertility